Well, thank you all for coming, and thank you to Infosys for giving us the venue. I was just saying it's an amazing venue because you can see the mountains. You know, this is it with Davos, isn't it? To be in a place like this. The trouble is, all the UAE chaps sitting by the window are a little bit cold. They've got to wear their coats, so it's not because they're immediately going to run out the door. It's they're cold. And what I wanted to say actually is that we've been coming to Davos now for since 2019. So 4 years, and with each year that goes by, we understand a little bit more about it. It's not a very easy place to understand, actually. And in the first year I came, I thought that you just came and you went round and you sort of helped yourself and went into every meeting and all this kind of thing. I only discovered in the first year that, no, you had to be invited to everything. So you go to the door and knock on the door, and they go, no, you can't come in. Sorry, goodbye. I think I've kind of worked that out now, so we now have a programme, and it's very, very interesting. We now bring a team of 8 from brand finance. We've got our Chinese colleagues, we've got our American colleagues, we've got our UK colleagues, and we stay down in clusters, which makes it even better. So we have a party down in clusters, and then we come up here. And it's interesting to see how it's changed over the years. We were here in May, and it was exceptionally quiet. We're here now, and it's really quite busy, and that's really quite cool. And I was just saying that the best thing that's happened this time, as far as I'm concerned, is there really isn't much snow. Because the couple of times that I came, it was like walking around in an ice rink. And, you know, like, I kept thinking, oh, I'm going to break my leg. Anyway, today is the most exciting day of Brand Finance's year, I have to say, because today is the day that we launch our Global 500 report, which is the list of the most valuable brands in the world as far as we are concerned. And we distribute that globally. We're using Newswire to distribute it to over 10,000 media outlets worldwide. It gets tremendous pickup. Our media department love to say, never mind the quality, feel the width, and show me like 100,000 mentions all over the world, including China. And my colleagues from China interviewed me yesterday, and it reliably informed me that I went out on Chinese TV yesterday in a piece involving the first Prime Minister of China, who is one of the 7 most important people in China. Now, I didn't get to talk to him. I did a piece to camera about Chinese brands. He did a piece to camera about Davos, and then they spliced the two together. But I have to say, I felt very privileged to be in that company. And largely it was about the fact that I was talking about how successful Chinese brands have been and continue to be, which I'll talk a little bit about in a sec. Now, the report is really very big. There's a lot in there. And I'm just going to give you a few very minor highlights. And then we're going to have our chat with our esteemed panel. If you want to look at it, I show you the QR code at the end. You can go to our brand directory site and see everything. And it's all very transparent. We're all very happy to talk to anyone about their brand valuations at any point. So let me just begin the presentation. Many of you might know Brand Finance, just briefly. We were set up in 1996. The reason that I want to put this on there is because I like to point out to everyone that Brand Finance is fundamentally not a creative advertising or communications agency. We don't really do any executional work for brands because we are measuring how successful that executional work has been. But what we do is we advise clients whether we think their executional work is working. You know, if they spend $500 million, are they actually getting a decent ROI from it? Which you can only do if you're not actually part of the agency, in our opinion. So, and in fact, we have pioneered standards in ROI measurements, in brand valuation measurement, and brand evaluation with the ISO. I am actually chairman of the ISO's Committee on Brand Measurement, which is chaired by the China Council on Brand, its secretariat is provided by the China Council on Brand Development, which was a specific initiative of President Xi about 10 years ago, where he said, I want Chinese brands to be global, I want them to be high quality, I don't want us just to be the workshop of the world making stuff for everyone else. And so I sit on that panel trying to improve the quality of standards. We're also registered with the Institute of Chartered Accountants for training accountants, and with various other professional bodies in things like market research and trademark management. So we're very much a professional services firm, really. So that's us, and we're dotted all over the world, but our headquarters is right in the middle of the city in an old bank just opposite the Bank of England. So, you know, we did that intentionally to try and convince everyone, you know, like, brand finance is right there in the financial hub of things. We're not in Soho making ads. So I thought I would just explain what we do in very, very simple terms. We do a lot of market research. We are not fundamentally a market research like a firm like Ipsos. We commission research, we design research, we interpret it, we use it, but we do an awful lot of research these days, and that is encapsulated into our Brand Finance 500. The central part of everything we do is some form of valuation, whether it's business, intangible assets, or in particular brands, but we do all of those things. Brands is our forte, but we value all of those different assets. And then finally, using that to inform strategy. Now, strategy is an interesting word because people use it for a whole range of different things, creative strategy, communication strategy, all manner of different strategy. We're very much modest in that we just show the financial outcomes of what we've done, the financial implications of decisions that people might make. For example, just to put it in real terms, sometimes people decide they're going to switch their brand. And quite often the decision is just emotional or driven by an agency that wants to do something. And we say, well, whoa, hold on. What are the 3 or 4 alternatives? What is the financial implication of doing that? Is it going to be successful or not? And we humbly submit that to the client, and then they feed that into their process. We don't tend to be the ego at the front, sort of saying what the strategy should be. We're the quiet guys just saying whether it will work or not. And I hope that we'll have a bit of a chat about that in a minute with Hatto. Our centre to what we do, when we first started doing all this kind of work, we didn't have our own original research, and it was one of the weaknesses. So we decided about 5 years ago, I think it was 5 years ago, to start doing our own research on a global basis into the brands that we are passing an opinion on, so that we have research, we have financial analysis, and then we show what we think it's worth, and we look at the outside world in relation to those brands as well. So they have fully formed brand valuations using public data. Sometimes people say they must be very flimsy. They're not flimsy, actually, because you can get one hell of a lot of information from public sources. And interestingly enough, over the years, we have presented to clients with information that they've not provided us with anything. We just got it from equity analysts, from the city, from things that are published. And I remember once presenting to a finance director, and he looked very suspiciously at me and said, how did you hack into our system and get all the data? And I had to point out to him, well, actually, you tell all the equity analysts that, and they told us. So we probably know as much about your business as most of your directors do. And from that, we build a thing. So we decided to go for research to substantiate what we're doing, to show what happens to demand. And so we've got 150,000 respondents in nearly 39 countries, in 32 sectors. We cover 4,000 brands now, and we do valuations. I think we do valuations to 5,000, but we actually have 4,000 brands that we've got original research for. 7 years of data. So I got my date wrong. And just top line, what we announced today is the top 500, broken down by all the sectors. There's no time to show you all of that. But here are the top 10. Amazon just overtook Apple this year. Apple was top last year, and Amazon has overtaken them. Quite a lot of people are a bit surprised that we say Amazon is such a strong brand and such a good brand, and we talk about it again in a minute. Amazon is a great brand, and sometimes they're controversial for all sorts of reasons, but the way that they have diversified into different things just demonstrates how powerful it is. They keep innovating, and that's the theme of our session today, to talk about innovation, and in particular in relation to sustainability, because sustainability is the thing here at Davos. So Apple and Amazon, they swapped places, but also they went backwards, because a lot of these high-tech, digital businesses have had a bad year from a financial point of view, where markets are reappraising what their long-term prospects are likely to be. And that's gone right the way across the tech sector in America. It's no secret. A lot of company valuations have gone down, and the valuations of the brands have gone down too. Google's a bit of an exception. And so is Microsoft. So Microsoft is actually doing quite well, and Google is doing pretty well. So Walmart comes in at number 5. Now, interestingly enough, during the 2009 financial crisis, we made Walmart the number 1, or we didn't make them the number 1, they were the number 1 brand in the world by value. And everyone said we were idiots, partly because
they said, well, Walmart is not a global brand, so why is it included anyway? Our view is, well, it doesn't matter whether you're in multiple countries. It's just a question of your absolute size. And there is no question that Walmart is the dominant player in, grocery retail and retail in the world by virtue of its size in the States. And I remember I saw a stat a few years ago which said that 15% of all exports from China, manufactured exports from China, are sold by Walmart in America. May not still be the case, but a very large volume of it was going through. And they've grown by 2% in the last year. I anticipate that over the next year they will grow substantially because we are just entering a period of economic downturn. And in those periods, brands like Walmart are the ones that succeed. Samsung has had a bit of a rocky year this year. So have some of the Chinese banks for well-trailed reasons. Verizon is pretty stable. But the two stars, which I'll come back to later, are Tesla and TikTok. So one of the things I said that the overall value of brands has gone down. American brands are the blue ones. They still have the most. China grew very rapidly over a period. It's gone a bit stable. We keep saying, and I just did an interview for Chinese TV, saying that 79 out of 500 brands are Chinese. We keep expecting the number to grow and the size of them to grow. Because to this day, only 5% of the value of most Chinese brands comes from outside China. And despite President Xi's interjection that they should grow their global brands, it takes quite a long time to get the skills. But China, I think it's fair to say, is rapidly getting the skills to develop brands in all sorts of ways. And I think we're going to see a surge in the next few years in the number that appear in this table. But overall, the number the value fell back slightly because of some of the headwinds in the economy. And if we look at it by sector, you can see that many of the big sectors actually went backwards in terms of brand value, other than telecom as a whole, which obviously has probably been driven by some of the things that Hatton will talk about, and by the growth in connectivity during and after COVID. And so if we look at autos and media, autos generally have had a bad time, but Tesla continues to surge ahead in terms of its value. For fairly obvious reasons, and TikTok has done extremely well, albeit that it's been coming in for a bit of criticism recently. So let's just look at why. So we pulled out, a couple of simple stats from our research about those brands. If you take Tesla, they grew by 44% in their brand value, and what this shows here is when measured against innovation, which we measure in our global brand equity monitor, they come way higher than the second place brand. I'm not sure which the second place brand is. Does anyone know? Anyway, or the average or the minimum. So they are seen to be highly innovative for obvious reasons. And in terms of sustainability, they are also seen to be extremely high. Now, it's surprising in a way because many of the other brands have jumped on the bandwagon and have been for several years. They get the first mover advantage, and that will continue for some time, I expect, even though people like VW are powering ahead. And then when we look at TikTok, they've also grown dramatically. They are also seen to be innovative, and their innovation is around designing software that understands what customers are doing, what length of clips do they want, what kind of clips do they want, feeding it back to them, growing their turnover. And apparently some of the other social media platforms have developed software to mimic what TikTok does to try and maximize their results. But anyway, so TikTok has led the way with innovation. Over there, interestingly, when it's shown to be unique, they are unique amongst the consumer social media. The one that comes above them is actually LinkedIn, because if you think about it, they're the only one of the kind. So they are really unique. And this is the last slide. This is the study that we have commissioned this year, specifically because we have noticed that who wouldn't have noticed? Sustainability is the most hot topic for countries, for companies, and for brands. So we actually commissioned our own research, which we are launching tomorrow, actually, to show how the different brands have done in terms of perceived sustainability, not actual sustainability performance. You'd have to do an audit to find out how people have done actually. It is about the perception that the stakeholders and general public have of those brands. Now, that is extremely important in our opinion, because we saw a study a couple of years ago where, for example, IBM, who are very good at sustainability, apparently, got a terrible score on perceived sustainability, whereas Apple, who are not so good, I won't be rude about Apple, but they didn't have such a good record in reality, but everyone thought they were a highly sustainable brand. So the difference between perception and reality is very important for brand managers. And so what we've got is we've calculated what value amongst the top brand values is at risk if they cannot get their sustainability performance together. The top one being Amazon. $20 billion is at stake if they can't convince the world that they are a sustainable brand. And over here, we also look at what are the drivers of demand for brands, and the fourth highest is sustainability at the moment. So the final thing that we have done, I saw a session yesterday where they basically said technology for implementing a lot of these sustainable measures, particularly climate change, is all there. The problem is leadership. There has to be leadership to make it happen. And so since we came to the first year, we didn't have this. And then we realized that there are lots of leaders here. And we thought, well, we'll do something that they'd be interested in. So we launched what we call the Brand Guardianship Index, which looks at the performance of CEOs at managing the brand and reputation of their brands. And we look at the whole 500, but we publish 100 of them. And these are the people who won over the last couple of years. Jeff Bezos got it in the first year, about 1 week before everything hit the fan in relation to his divorce and all that kind of stuff. So this actually, he was awarded the thing before he went into nosedive. Marilyn Hewson of Lockheed Martin is an incredible force of nature. Ajay Banga, Satya Nadella, and I put that over there with a question mark. I can reliably inform you he is not the brand leader of the year, and that's why I put it there. We're announcing it tomorrow, so you can see that then. And the interesting thing is, last year he did very well because he provided Satlink to Ukraine, and everyone knew it, and he got a lot of very positive coverage. This year, his travails at Twitter have not really helped his reputation with anyone. Here we are. There's the QR code. You can have a look at the report. We don't have hard copies because we're very sustainable. It also means we don't have to lug them around to Davos, which is very handy. And then finally, I'm now going to invite Hatem Dawadem to the stage to have a discussion about EAND. Thank you, Hatem.
Thank you.
Hatem and I go back quite a long way, actually, because one of our first ever clients was Vodafone, and we did quite a bit of work looking at when Vodafone first acquired Mansman and AirTouch. They had to transition loads and loads and loads of brands. And our first job ever was to look at what would the implication be for the value of their brand portfolio if they were to switch them all over. So we were working on that. And then a few years later, we met Hatem because he was head of partner markets and then head of staff at Vodafone. And I always remember Red, Rock Solid and Restless. Very exciting. Sure, you could start by talking about that, actually. And so Hatem is here to talk about his current thing, where he's been a director at Etisalat, which is now EAND, since 2015. He's come up through the ranks. And last year, I think it was last year, you were made, 2020, you were made Group CEO. So it's a very exciting company with very exciting plans, but I won't do the talking. I'm going to let you do the talking. So how should we start? Should we say, how is it that EAND is doing, and why did you change the name, and what is the excitement?
Okay, so hello everyone. Really happy and thank you for the invitation to talk to a great attendance here. So where we are now as a business, we're doing pretty well. I think it reflects on your index on from brand finance perspective, but financially, as a company, we have fared, let's say, much better than the average for telecom companies. And the reason for that is we have realized that over the last 2 decades, the world has moved on a lot. And we have seen, and again, I've been long in the telecom industry and technology. So if we go back to, let's say, the year 2000, many of the companies that you see here leading were tiny companies at the time. And they had a very clear vision of how to grow and how to change the world, while telecoms, very regulated industry, we were focused on many cases on just individual markets and focus on just providing the pipe for connectivity. And so over the year, telecom companies mostly remained where they are, while we see these huge companies coming from the internet space and the technology space growing to become really the, let's say, the apparent technology companies. When people think of telecom now, they don't think of them as technology, but more of utility. So during the pandemic, we took the time, as there was, less time for commute, less time for physical meetings, and a lot more time to connect to the team and to think about things. And we came up with an updated strategy where we said we want to transform back from just being a telecom company to becoming a technology company. And as part of that, we had to change our business model. And maybe we talk about that a bit later, but also to reflect not only to the outside, but inside the company that we're different. We also changed the brand, and that's why Etisalat became Etisalat and More, became e&, and it became Red.
So can you explain the rationale behind e&, and how that relates to innovation?
I think it's the and factor that is very important, because successful companies don't make choices. They make choices, of course, but they don't say we will only do this. You can do this and that and that and that. And this is exactly the driving force behind our strategy. We are not going to just do telecom. We're going to do telecom. We're going to do enterprise. We're going to do consumer platforms. We're going to do venture capital. However, it's all this and telecom as well. So, and this is where the and is very significant to the way we look at things.
One of the things that we've noticed is that the share price of e&, over the last couple of years has done pretty well as the new strategy has emerged and as it's being reevaluated, not as a utility but as a tech company. What's the story that you're telling to the equity analysts, and where are the big things going to happen in the next couple of years, do you think, if you're allowed to say that anyway?
No, I can say clearly, telecoms, as many utilities, is very predictable. We are growing as a telecom. The growth is varied between our more developed markets and emerging markets, anywhere between the low single digit for advanced markets to double digit in emerging markets. But it's still, as an average, it's a kind of a single digit growth that we see in telcos. And that's in markets that we are lucky to be in. However, there are other markets around the world where you see telecoms declining. However, if we look at what the technology companies are doing, they have growth. Some growth is happening now, and some growth is expected in the future. So as we started shifting our emphasis from only telecom to telecom, which is still there, which, again, for our shareholders, guarantees that they continue to get their dividends and they get the objective they have from investing. In addition to this, we are investing for the future in the growth sector. So we have invested in video streaming, we're investing in music, we're investing in cybersecurity, we're investing in cloud infrastructure. So we are really adding to the portfolio items that are not necessarily going to generate a lot of profit today, but are definitely important for tomorrow.
It's interesting, actually. One of the things, brands and intellectual property are intangible assets, and they can cross borders very easily. Physical assets can't cross borders, and you're locked in a certain geographic area. One of the things that some of the new brands have demonstrated, it doesn't matter where you come from, you can still become a global phenomenon. I mean, just look at TikTok, huge brand now, as a result of having great intellectual property. So theoretically, the same thing could happen with e&. If you develop the right thing, you could become a global brand. Is that something which is on the agenda?
Oh, absolutely. And there are some of the areas that we are investing in are going to go across borders. So, for example, while we operate as a telco in 16 markets, we acquired in 2022 the biggest regional TV streaming platform, Stars Play, and actually it's operating in 22 markets. So we're already today operating in markets and selling the service in markets where we don't operate as a telco. Today, we also acquired, end of 2021, cybersecurity company, and we have clients for that company in Kuwait, in Bahrain and Qatar. These are in countries where we do not operate as a telco. So by default, by going into technology, we expect to be operating in a lot more markets than we do as a regulated telco. However, as a telco, we do have an advantage in the markets where we operate as a telco,
Right.
because we have engaged customer base. And at the end of the day, the most essential thing for any business is the customer. So having these engaged customers means also that there's this kind of virtuous circle, because I have the telco, I can invest in future, but because I invest in the future and I have the telco, I can really build on it and cross-sell and upsell and so on.
So I've got two final questions before saying thank you very much. The first one is how you address the sustainability issues, and there are many sustainability issues. What is Ian's approach towards sustainability?
I think it was one of the things that we realized early on, that when we were forming our strategy, that it is essential, because the customers look at it now. Customers have become a lot more aware, and they choose to work and to be customers of a company that has a good ESG rating. Talent look at it. Mm-hmm. Governments engage a lot more when you are, as a company, overall looking at ESG. So sustainability is part of it, but the overall ESG has become very important to us, and we have done in multitude of things. So from, for example, closing the gender gap in the company. So 3 years ago, in the senior team, there were no females in the senior team. Now it's 30% of the senior team, and that's only in 3 years, and it's going very fast. In fact, from our new hires, in the last 2 years, almost 60% of them are females. So we are really closing the gender gap very fast. In the way we have built our different functions, from compliance, from anti-corruption, anti-bribery, and so on, we consider ourselves best in class. In fact, the MSCI ESG index shows us at A-rated, which is one of the highest in the region as companies, and this is because we take it seriously. And of course, and I left it to the end, is environmental impact that we have. We have also engaged and taken that very serious. We're also the first telco in the region, or technology company in the region now, as I dare say, not the telco anymore, that has made a pledge for carbon neutrality by 2030.
Right.
And we are working with all the different partners in order to deliver this, not only now for our operations and head office in the UAE, but across the whole footprint. It's a bit more challenging in some of our African markets, but we are about to also, over the coming period, come up with clear targets that we illustrate how committed we are to this.
So my final question is about the transition to E&. Etisalat, we've been measuring for some years, and we regard it as one of the, well, it is actually the strongest brand in the Middle East, and the strongest telecom brand in the Middle East. So it's an exceptionally strong brand, and you're now transitioning the goodwill from that to E&. And it's one of those things that we have grappled with over the years that brand finance has been in existence, which is how much do you need to invest, how hard you need to work to actually get everyone to know E&, and get the goodwill to come across. And how are you addressing that? Are you spending a lot of money, or are you doing it by demonstrating how good you are?
I think it's a mixture, and I think being a telco, being in the hand of the customer every day, they look at their phone and they see the network name, makes it much easier. Because if you're just on the supermarket shelf, you cannot rely on the customer when they go to the supermarket and they see that brand, that they make the relation. But when they turn on their phone in the morning and they look at the screen and they find that the name has changed, it already triggers that change. And of course, given also that we are in the hands of the customers every day, we have a lot of digital assets where we're able to continuously communicate to the customer. So of course, yes, we have spent some money behind it, but the intimacy we have with the customers is very high, given that the one thing that I'm sure all of you would never forget whenever you're going and wherever you are is your mobile device. So that makes it much easier to transition, right, I think, than many other industries. So right, I agree with you, it costs a little bit. I think the returns are a lot more. And also, I think that we are lucky being in technology, that our interaction with the customer is a lot more intimate, and that allows us to communicate the change and communicate the transition in a much more efficient way.
Thank you very much, Hatem. I spared Hatem's blushes at the beginning by not mentioning where he came in our brand guardianship index, I can now announce that he actually came 22nd out of the 500 sample. And this was not brand finance commenting. This is commentators in the sector who we have interviewed. They are generally equity analysts who know the individual and the company. So congratulations on that, and congratulations for the other performance of Ian and Etty Salat. We're looking forward to seeing what happens in the next year or so.
Thank you. We're very excited.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dave.
Now moving on to the second part, we have Sumit, the EVP of marketing for Infosys, who's going to come join us, and Annika, who is the Sustainability Director for Southeast Asia from Unilever, who is going to come and join the stage and talk about those two key topics, one being innovation in general terms, and the other one being sustainability. And if I may, I'll start with you. I think it would be interesting just to hear your general view, rather than asking you a question. How do you think sustainability is playing into the corporate world? I know that within Unilever, Alan Jope has come in for a lot of flack recently, and before him, Paul Polman came in for a lot of flack. So, on the one hand, a large part of the constituency is very supportive. It's a bit like Marmite. You know, a lot of people think it's great, but some people don't think it's great, and quite often they are the financial people. But most sensible people think that what Unilever has been doing is fantastic. So I'd just be interested to hear your perspective on how it fits into corporate success.
Thanks very much, and good morning, everybody. You know, sustainability has become the buzzword after transformational leadership here at Davos. And I think that itself speaks volumes. And the reason why you have me here sitting in the center is perhaps sustainability is extremely relevant. That's part of the indicative answer. From a performance standpoint, I think let me just shift gears to the Indian entity of Unilever, which is Hindustan Unilever Limited. And be it our shareholder value or our performance on DJSI, Dow Jones Sustainability Index, where we have come up on the top spot in the FMCG brand, or our practices from product superiority to consumer perception to the trust that we've built over the years, I think that itself shows how sustainability being embedded in the very heart of business leads to great value creation for stakeholders. And the kind of work that we've driven over the years, you know, the pandemic showcased a whole lot of challenges. But if we kind of pause and reflect back for a minute, coming out of the pandemic and with the inflation pressures, if a brand like HUL continues to do well with the shareholders, there has to be something more than what meets the eye, right? Mm-hmm. And we have invested a lot in sustainability, product superiority, building the trust in consumers, in the perception, as well as the brand proposition, wherein I could probably give you an example of Lifebuoy, for instance. We all know that Lifebuoy was right at the center when it came to the pandemic because obviously it produces soaps and sanitizers. Mm-hmm. And from that perspective, when we were doing our TV advertisements during the pandemic, the brand said, it doesn't matter which soap you use. Just use a soap. Just clean your hands. And that is sustainability being positioned in the narrative. While at the back end, what we continuously try to do is improve the product in helping with bettering our ante on, you know, delivering hygiene as a goal for people. I think these two combined with sustainability at the heart of it, looking at how much water you're using, what is the overall footprint of the product from emissions, so on and so forth, all of this does lead to superiority in the long term. So I think sustainability is not a buzzword, it's not a fad. I come from an organization where it's completely embedded in the heart of the organization. And that has very clearly proven to be, I think, a trust-building factor over the years for the brands that we've built. And that continues even post-pandemic.
It's interesting, actually, because the ex-CMO of Unilever in London, Keith Weed, I remember going to see a presentation he gave once, and he was, you know, it was quite funny, actually. He said, yes, I want to tell you, I'm abolishing our sustainability department. And everyone was sort of shocked. And then he went on to say, well, I've abolished the sustainability department because it has to infuse the whole organisation. And then he proceeded to say how they had brought it into the proceedings for the whole company. But, one of the things that always, or has not confused me, but, it's challenging to think about, which is there are 17 sustainability development goals, and they range from, inclusivity to governance to climate change to environment. And I think people do get confused about, well, some people, when they talk about sustainability, just mean climate change. Do you want to comment on that? Is there still a big job to be done to explain to people what the dimensions are and which dimensions apply to which brands?
Yeah, sure. I think at the heart of everything is what is material to your brands, right? Mm-hmm. And if the brand is very clear in the value proposition, for example, Hellman, the mayonnaise brand very clearly says taste, not waste. And that positioning itself makes it very clear. All we are saying is put $1 of mayonnaise and all the leftovers in your fridge can become more tasty, and then therefore you're not wasting and adding to a whole lot of environmental impact. And similarly, all our brands that have a deeper impact on water would have that kind of positioning. So I think, of course, it can be a lot more confusing for people, but the brands have to be sensible in their positioning and really hit the nail on the head when it comes to the materiality around that brand. And overall, if I look at it from a corporate perspective, I think there are different values that are attached to the corporate positioning as well. Mm-hmm. And from that goal, on the SDG front of it, you need to obviously be able to connect the dot and tell the story better to then have less of misconceptions on what the organization is really talking about.
So I'll come on to you in a minute. So just one final question. Sure. I know that you've been very involved in equality for women in the workplace in particular. And one of the interesting things about our brand guardianship index is just how few CEOs are actually women. That performance by the lady who ran Lockheed Martin was a real outlier, and apparently she was a force of nature and was amazing. And there have been one or two others, actually. Indra Nooyi of Pepsi was an amazing woman as well. So what's your prognosis for how that's going to change in the next 10 years, or do you have a prognosis?
Well, I can only hope for it to change in the next 10 years. But I think just the fact that, we were discussing in another forum, just the fact that CSOs in the C-suite positions are mostly women, if you see around yourself. Right. When Mattel comes out with Barbie, who is now a CSO, it's a statement, for example. And I think the CEOs as well of the world, if the next 10 years of growth are dedicated to India, I think the next 10 years of top leadership definitely is dedicated to women and gender balance.
There definitely do seem to be a lot more senior female leaders in India. Yeah. So I'll now move over to you, Sumit. I don't know whether you want to start with that particular topic. I know that you take it.
That is a topic you have to start with.
Right, okay, yeah, right. Inclusivity.
Yes.
So how does Infosys deal with it, and what's your view about it? And is there more opportunity in the IT services and IT sectors and tech sectors than some of the other more traditional sectors, or do you think we're at a sea change point in inclusivity?
Okay, I think let me just take off from where you asked Kanika the question on the evolution and the gender gaps. In fact, I was at the panel yesterday morning at the Equality Lounge. We were debating exactly this point, that the recent research from the World Economic Forum shows it's going to take 132 years.
132
years for the gender gaps to be plugged, and that paints a fairly bleak picture of the progress we have made, which is great, but the distance we have to cover, which is quite ironic. And if you were to just think of data, just the data out there, in managerial positions in the global workforce, there are 34% women, but only 2% actually rise up to the CEO level. So there's really a massive gap and a support system that's needed to really fix what we call the broken rung, because you can't just fix things at the top. You got to fix things from the pipeline itself, and that's where we play a lot, because IT sector in that sense has an advantage because we get a very, very large stream of diverse workforce right from college itself. Infosys is nearly 40% women in the workforce. And that, in some sense, solves the problem of people walking into the workforce. But then again, that doesn't solve the problem of as you go up the ladder, you still see that there's a huge break in the ladder, and that's where most of our focus is. How do we support women? How do we support women who take career breaks to come back? The whole idea around non-linear acceptance of career paths.
I mean, it seems to me that technology is one of the key factors in changing the dynamic. Because one of the things they said about the COVID was that because everyone's working from home, everyone has their laptops, everyone has all the different technology, and you've got Zoom, it made it a lot easier to be a part-time worker or a flexible worker or whatever. Since the pandemic, a lot of people, including actually Jane Fraser, who's the CEO of Bank of America, isn't it? Is it Bank of America? Citigroup. She was in the press yesterday saying, everyone working from home is a malingerer. We're going to try and get them back into work. Now, it seems to me that technology is the empowering factor that will allow women to be more flexible and rise up. I mean, do you agree with that?
Well, actually, David, I have a slightly different point of view on that. And the way I see it, if we were to say that technology is going to fix the gap, we might be simplifying the problem a little too much. Because if you look at even the pandemic, when women were able to work from wherever, you saw some of the fastest decline. We went back in steps because women are also someone who are responsible for the primary caregiving responsibility at home. And you suddenly have them handling so much more than they were handling before. So it's not as simple a problem as we may outline it to be. Yes, tech makes it easier. The one good thing of pandemic is that flexibility of work became standard. We couldn't have found that massive acceleration of acceptance from anywhere but for the pandemic. So I think we should thank the pandemic for that, and that helps. But I think there is a lot more to be done to make these conversations natural in the workplace today. The fact that mothers, women with kids, women with caregiving responsibilities have to be treated differently. And that should be a part of the narrative, and we need to normalize that narrative.
I mean, just bringing Brand Finance's own experience in, and we're a relatively small company, it's quite interesting. During the pandemic, we basically shut our office in the city, gave everyone desks and stuff to work from home, and said, you all work from home, you're all flexible, do what you like. And when we came to the end of it, we found that there was much more keenness for the males of our staff to come into the office, because when they were at home, they had to do all the tidying up and cleaning and cook for themselves and stuff like that. Whereas when they came into the office, we provide a bit of food, it's warm, they don't have to do anything, and they could go to the pub at the end of the day. Whereas it wasn't quite the same amongst our female staff. They were just happy to stay at home. And I think in some respects that can create you're back into the old problem. A bit too blokey at work because the women would prefer to stay at home. Now, the other experience we had actually was that we have diversity and inclusivity training, and I'm being the oldest person in the firm, I probably need it more than anyone else. But one of the things we were talking about was, how you make the conditions right. And it's interesting, I was really taken by the fact that positive discrimination is illegal, but positive action is not. And so you have to work out what is positive action that is not discriminatory. And that's a bit of a challenge, especially for a company like us, but I think for all companies. So the second question I wanted to talk about, but we'll move off that for a moment, just back to innovation in a general sense. Do you think the world economy is going to be saved by innovation from tech companies and will spurt back into growth? And what will your role be with that? And when you've answered that, we can come back to that and say, what's the kind of innovation going on in the food sector?
I think, first of all, if you were to just look at the data that you just presented, the fact that large percentage of tech companies have actually come down but the ones that have actually possibly moved up are showing a much higher traction on both innovation and sustainability. I think there you have your answer. Over the years, we know that the power of innovation is foundational to driving growth. Power of innovation is foundational to differentiation, because if brands exist to drive the business forward. And if you have to bring in innovation, that's the only way you can differentiate out there in the marketplace, and that will feed back for growth to your business and value to the end consumer. So I think it's a given that innovation will be integral to moving the world forward. Will it save us from the immediate short term? I don't have the answer to that. But clearly, I think without innovation, certainly we would have a bigger problem in our hand than we are currently staring at.
And can we have some words about the food industry? I mean, is it just stable, or is it going to be changed?
So let me just talk about FMCG as a sector, and food is a subsector of that, at least for us at Unilever. I just want to, again, take a step back and look at the word innovation. At the end of the day, we sometimes end up using innovation very matter-of-factly, but innovation essentially should not deplete the core. The purpose of innovation is that it has to strengthen the core. It's not necessarily a pivot, and it's not necessarily a disruptor, right? And if it's viewed in that lens, that, you're looking at innovation to strengthen the core, then there will be financial return that will come from innovation, because the value proposition of innovation is like that. And therefore, be it food, be it home care, be it personal care, product superiority and innovation and the role of R&D there becomes very critical. And I'm going to just jump a little bit to go back to the gender point that you were making. I think in Unilever, we really pride ourselves that our R&D is gender balanced. 50% are women.
Right.
And in HUL itself, there is a whole lot of work that we are driving for gender balance, and we are more than 40%, 42% there, right? And from the point that he made, at the end of the day, it is about equity of opportunity, and which that means that it's not necessarily digital space that enables women, because that could be in some way, I think, walking on the thin line of maybe also stereotyping that it's easier for them at home, but really enabling the entire ecosystem that strengthens them to come to workforce. So for example, when I had my baby in pandemic, it was very easy for me to get back to my workplace simply because I had an ecosystem right there where in the office I have a daycare, I have a school for him, and it's so much easy. And that's gender neutral, by the way. So men, women, anybody in the office, from an inclusion point of view, can have their children right there. So how is it that you're strengthening the ecosystem and the conversation and the narrative? And is there a role of innovation then to strengthen the brand positioning on each and every pillar of ESG? And coming directly to the foods industry, I think regenerative agriculture and looking at the value proposition of also regenerative agriculture in strengthening the value chain while looking at small and medium farmers, consolidating them, ensuring that there is product superiority, it kind of all ties back together.
I mean, from a personal point of view, I think very often the best innovation is the simplest innovation. And thinking about it in terms of your products, when you decided to make Hellmann's not in a bottle but put it in that plastic thing so that it all drops to the bottom, was about the best innovation you ever made. It saved a lot of time and effort. Anyway, that's by the by. I think what I'll do now is, does anyone wish to ask a question? I've got time for just a couple of questions if anyone in the audience would like to ask our panellists. Does anyone have a pressing desire to ask a question? Doesn't sound like pressing desire going on there very much at all, no. So in which case, I will say thank you very much. I think we'll be around afterwards having a coffee, so you can ask your question then. So thanks very much to the panellists. Thank you very much indeed. If you'd like to just take your seats again, I'll just wind up with a couple of remarks. I said at the beginning, branddirectory.com is where all of our tables are. If you ask any of our colleagues who are here, they can direct you towards individual reports or the ones that we're launching tomorrow. You're all welcome to come to what we're doing tomorrow if you wish to. One of the things we're going to do, actually, one of the studies we do is about soft power which is the soft power of nations and the effect of brands on nations, which will be quite interesting. And that's going to be over in the UAE lounge with a digital media expert from Israel. So it should be quite a feisty discussion with him. I met him yesterday, and it will be really quite interesting hearing what he's got to say about nation brands. So I hope if you are interested in any of those, let us know. The only thing, I'll just finish with a comment. I saw in the press that apparently Klaus Schwab is being criticised because he has not actually created a succession plan for the World Economic Forum. And I was sitting there thinking, but hang on, he founded it. The World Economic Forum belongs to him, doesn't it? I think it's his business. And I was thinking, nobody tells Warren Buffett he's got to retire. He's about 95, isn't he? And nobody told the Queen she had to retire, and she died aged 99. So I think he's got a few more years left to go. But, you know, if there is a vacancy, I'll put my name forward, because I wouldn't mind running WEF. It looks like a pretty good organisation to me. And with that, I'd like to say, can you thank the panellists and Hatem? Thank you very much. And I hope you find our materials interesting. Thank you very much.